Podcasts proudly presents The Broadcasters Podcast, a weekly media commentary talking about traditional and digital media headlines and talking to the content creators out front and behind the scenes. Here is the king of podcasts. So the country and the world is trying to crawl its way out of this pandemic and move on with regular life. But of course, there's a lot of moving pieces that are going to make it really kind of tough to make it happen. But things are moving along as it happens and support is needed. And while that's going on, there are certain sectors in the digital disruption that are dominating right now. So we'll go ahead and talk about that here on this edition of the Broadcasters Podcast, episode number 119. Thank you all for tuning in and finding the show at broadcasterspodcast.com and however you find the show here on the network and the network of shows across kingofpodcasts.com, which I'm really grateful for all of you to go ahead and check out. By the way, kingofpodcasts.com is now my professional portfolio. You can actually find all of my content in there. Everything that I do, it's all in one shot. But of course, broadcasterspodcast.com is still hosting the website. I'm trying to get it moved over off the WordPress.com site over to the main site. I'll get there eventually. I got a webmaster working on it right now. This time during the pandemic and quarantine gave me the opportunity to do it, so I'm working on it. I'll get it there soon enough. Meantime, before I get started, remember, if you want to go and help out this show, best way you can do it is when you go shop for Amazon. I know all of you have Amazon Prime. I know you got Audible accounts and you buy stuff from Amazon all the time. Please order Amazon through my special link, kingofamazon.com. Again, that's kingofamazon.com. Please do that. You'll help out the show greatly. Moving along, we have stories where stimulus is still needed across the board, and there are certain sectors that are still looking. We've talked about the theater owners asking for stimulus. We've talked about newspapers talking about stimulus. We've talked to, the entertainment sector, various areas looking for stimulus. We've also talked about some of the, workers that have been let go and have kind of swindled. We talked about the Ellen DeGeneres story. I talked about that on another YouTube video after the fact, really just trying to push it out there. And by the way, I do have a YouTube page where I do some other media-related stuff. I talked about the bad content we're seeing from all the network and cable shows that are still doing live and new content and how bad it looks and how bad it sounds. I recommend you go and check that out for yourselves. Head on over to youtube.com/JBRASCO951, JBRASCO951, or just do a search for King of Podcasts. You'll find me that way as well. Please subscribe, hit the bell, because as soon as I get subscribers, I want to be able to customize the URL, get the King of Podcast name, and get that used for everybody out there to check out for yourselves. So I hope you'll consider that. Democratic senators are calling for funding for local media and the coronavirus stimulus. Let's talk about that first of all. More than a dozen senators are calling for a future stimulus package addressing the economic fallout of the COVID-19, including funding for local journalism, because communities across the U.S. are at risk of losing their source of news because of the pandemic. And it's been signed so far by 18 Democratic senators. And the gist of the letter is that the struggles the news industry has felt over the last 2 decades as big tech platforms swallow up a majority of the ad revenue is a key source of profit during the print age. Newsroom employment has significantly decreased. 1,800 local newspapers have ceased operations since 2004, according to a University of North Carolina report. Newspaper chains are announcing furloughs. And in this one, Gannett, one of the largest newspaper chains, they will be forcing staffers to take 1 week of unpaid leave for the next 3 months. That's it. There you go, man. That's going to be tough. So that's one of the things we're talking about now. We'll see how it works out. The News Media Alliance, the CEO, David Cheverne, he represents 2,000 media organizations in the U.S. and elsewhere, told TheHill.com that small business provisions could be useful for many publishers and help them retain their staff. And basically he's saying that in the letters, in a press release, and according to the letter, quote, quality local journalism is what we are all depending right now. Look, there's going to be a point where certain outlets, there's a time where there's bailouts and there's those that are not. Are we going to have a complete loss of journalism? And how much of this journalism have not done the right job by all of us by not reporting the news correctly? and I've incorrectly reported news, and I've used clickbait, and have just really not served the public interest, that's what you got to ask yourself. Are we getting the right kind of journalism from these companies that are trying to go and help out? Well, I think there's some that are in the local end. Well, mostly I think it is newspapers. But if they're small businesses, that's one way to go. But the other thing, too, is, all the work is online. So newspapers can't expect a bailout here. That's one thing that we have to consider. And there's going to be some that are not going to get that. But I don't think they go away altogether. I think there's things that can happen. So part of it's going to be, which will be unfortunate, is they might get corporatized. Some other companies might buy them out because of the properties they own and the distinction that some of these papers have. That could be one thing that comes out. But it looks like it's mostly newspapers we're talking about now, not so much websites. But that's what they're talking about. Now, in this particular letter, they also mentioned the prevalence of misinformation at this time, the need for credible news sources. Well, I have to go and call back on those that are not doing that. Now, local TV stations, they're mostly corporate owned. So they're going to be propped up. As opposed to the newspapers, there's a lot of content that's being syndicated anyway by the companies that own them or the Associated Press, or just basically rehashing the Associated Press. Do they really need to do that? I mean, they're just doing just enough to try to keep, maybe some local sports, some other coverage. But really, what are they all doing? If it's opinions, is there any investigative reporting? No, not really. Not much. So that's the bigger problem. I mean, some stories and some newspapers, they're not going to do as well. I still think that local TV news can piggyback off of that. They can create sister sites that are much more tangible to the market and then do more reporting and do something where they can be promoted. It could be a partnership that goes with that. Or I've always said before, if you're going to have all these national public radio stations out there, why aren't they doing more to serve the public and do more news coverage? I mean, take the people that you have on board, let them come on board and do something where they can kind of, monetize it. I think it'd be much more important than anything else. I think that would be a better use of how the media can work. I think there just needs to be certain area sectors of the media that need to be reworked. You just can't keep propping up failing companies. It's again with the 2008 recession everybody was talking about. Why are all these banks being bailed out? Well, then why are all these media outlets being bailed out? Why do they need a bailout? Why do they deserve a bailout? And it's not just the newspapers, and it's not just, journalism in general. The other part is radio. In the same vein, there is a need for funding where the Shorenstein Center on Media Politics and Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School, they talked more about this kind of story about needing to fund journalism, finding innovation, success stories, and ideas for creative, sustainable partnerships. So this story got put together, and this is not that long ago. I wanted to bring this up because this is something that needs to be more considered. Now, this is back in June 2018, but still, think about what's being said here. This is what the Harvard study said, this particular story. With limited resources and dwindling revenues paralyzing the industry, it's clear that journalism needs financial support now more than ever. This is back in 2018, they're saying this. What's unclear is how it will survive in our relatively new digital landscape. Fortunately, funding for nonprofit views news media has seen a notable uptick in support, oftentimes in the form of new grants, which, while funders have traditionally supported journalism through public media, there is a growing number of nonprofit sites that are focusing on a variety of reporting styles, including issue-specific, investigative, accountability, advocacy, and more to fill the gaps created by newspaper cutbacks and an ever more polluted commercial news medium. So that's what they're talking about. So they talk about some ideas. And in this, they give a case study, which I'm not going to go into. They give several case studies, as a matter of fact. But the end result of all this, some of this includes where they get NPR support. They cite a couple of case studies. The Ford Foundation with the ACLU of Michigan. They cite the California Endowment and Youth Media Hubs. The John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation and the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting. The key takeaways for funders they mentioned here is this. Unrestricted support for nonprofit newsrooms is vital for many reasons. They said, first, with declining public trust of the news media, it is imperative to support and promote the idea of a free and independent press, not bound to or influenced by funders. Okay. Lacking a true business model for sustaining public interest news, funders should acknowledge and address the financial instability that results from newsrooms heavily supported by many small, short-term restricted grants, and reject the notion that general operating support leads to complacency. Quite the contrary, unrestricted support creates the necessary conditions within an organization for experimentation and innovation. Okay, it's fine. As long as we do not see people swaying away from the importance of journalism. Who, what, when, where, and why. I'm all fine with finding other ways to support nonprofit news outlets if they're doing the right thing. And they're not being funded by underlying factors that are not doing the good of the people. Like, that's the most important thing to me. So for hearing all this going on, that there needs to be more help for journalists out there, well, I understand that part. But it still comes down to, that's what they have to do. There's just no choice. Coming up a little bit later on in the program, I have a great 3-part interview to play for you. It will be with Hall of Fame broadcaster, the morning mayor, Dave Pratt. He's a member of the Broadcasters Hall of Fame, Music and Entertainers Hall of Fame. He's also the owner of Star Worldwide Networks, one of the largest, fastest growing internet radio and TV networks in the nation. And he's also a media consultant for Tribune Media Group with 40 television stations under the belt and America's largest markets, including WGN Radio in Chicago. So we'll talk to him. He's also best known as the morning mayor, who spent 30 years at Phoenix's FM rocker KUPD FM. We'll talk all about that and a lot of things going on with him in his radio career and the transition into his entrepreneurship, running basically a full-fledged digital marketing agency with Star Worldwide Networks. We'll talk all about that and follow his trek coming up a little bit later on. Part 1 of my interview with him comes up in just a few minutes. 90-minute interview. Really had a great time talking to him. In a crisis, Rolling Stone writes an interesting story. Every once in a while they put a radio story on, and I'm like, always wondering where they're going. So they say radio should be bigger than ever in a crisis, so why isn't it? So I love these stories. Listen, the last time I went after Rolling Stone and approached the Rolling Stone story was when they talked about the payola scandals coming back up and crawling back up into the limelight once again, which we haven't heard anything about as of new yet, but we will. We'll keep an eye on it. In the meantime, here's what's being said. Terrestrial music stations have a major cultural opportunity right now, but employees say a muddy strategy is standing in the way. And don't forget, not too long ago before this, iHeartRadio decided to go and lay a lot of people off in order to continue to unhinge from their continuing debt, even though they got through bankruptcy. But they decided another massive cut, massive layoffs beforehand. Again, horrible. They're just thoughtless human beings over there. They go right to KROQ, Los Angeles, former radio personality Kevin Ryder, who was part of the longtime popular duo Kevin and Bean. K-Rock had a cold, heartless attitude when he and his morning show team were fired at the end of March. The station had been an alternative rock staple in Los Angeles, the second largest in the market, and Ryder had been there for more than 30 years. So the new people in charge, he said, Kevin Ryder did, now working here for the building of the world-famous K-Rock. I don't think it means anything to them. It's a numbers business, and there's no family aspect to it anymore. It's only numbers. But this place was built without numbers. It was musicians, artists, and the special relationship between music, the station, and our fans, end quote. That's what it used to be, Kevin. You're absolutely right. Now, Rolling Stone makes the point that AM/FM radio provides localized, round-the-clock information and entertainment via friendly neighborhood voices. Well, I don't know what that is lately. I haven't heard about that. That's been gone since the consolidation, my friends, pretty much. So in theory, but they did say that. But it's the perfect platform in a global crisis that forces hundreds of millions of people to stay home. But Ryder's one of the many in the radio community, including on-air hosts, music directors, program directors, who have been shocked by sudden job losses, not just because of what iHeartMedia did, but also because COVID-19 did what it did. Because the music industry was affected, and so was radio. Why is terrestrial radio missing the opportunity here, Rolling Stone asks, and how should it be fighting to get back on top? The familiarity gap, here's what they preface first. In response to the pandemic, shut down live events in many other industries across the U.S. Conglomerates iHeartMedia and Entercom, which owns K-Rock, announced widespread firings and furloughs. Now, multiple sources work or have worked in radio told Rolling Stone that the K-Rock firings were a branding facelift a long time coming. K-Rock has long been looked at as the relative anomaly in the alternative radio format. Quote, it's almost its own format with a sound that leaned more rock and didn't match the current pop, hip-hop leading landscape, one industry employee says. Quote, now it's just basically flipping the match every other alternative station, which is what Entercom wanted, and Kevin Weatherly, the former program director, who left Entercom in February for Spotify, seemed to be protecting it from. So David Field, CEO of Entercom, was interviewed by Rolling Stone. He said those firings were indeed unrelated to the coronavirus and that local decisions are made by local management depending on how programs perform. Ratings on the show post Gene Bean Baxter left the show last year. So Kevin was running the show with a team. That happens. Sometimes teams break up and then one person stays around and works on it. At the moment in Miami, Paul Castronovo continues to do a morning show without young Ron Brewer. But that's been going for a few years now. So the show's ratings were not where they needed to be, so the decision was made locally that it was time for change. Rebuild a new show that would hopefully garner higher ratings. The timing of many of the company cuts, which Field admits was unfortunate in the case of K-Rock, may be rattling audiences' familiarity and contributing to radio shakiness. Quote, I was really looking forward to your show during these uncertain times to help keep me grounded, one of Ryder's fans wrote. He says, what brilliant timing. Quote, who wants to hear a familiar voice on the radio during a pandemic? Idiotic. So there's other people they talk to, and they go on and say, well, music fans are faced with a sprawling field of streaming options, may not need music radio. Many in the radio community would argue they would still need their DJs, but that's the other problem. What DJs are out there that's worthwhile to talk to, that have personality, that are able to keep people engaged? The DJs that are being hired now, they're not being hired for that. And in some cases, they're not even being hired for their voice. They're being hired for their looks. You see that, right? Look at how many women in radio are very attractive. There's a reason for that. The people that are also on there, it's not the voice anymore. You don't have to be like the big, fat, bald guy with a Hawaiian shirt anymore. That's gone. You don't have to have the smoker's voice. See, hey, new music right now. You don't have the 102.7 WNEW FM. Like, you don't have that whole feel of like the sound. You don't have the WABC sound. You don't have that. The good, rich, throaty sounds of all these DJs that were really wonderful, right? You don't have that anymore. So Keith Dakin, Vice President of Programming for a smaller radio company, he owns 14 stations in they own 14 stations on the East Coast. He said this, quote, you can hear your songs anywhere, but these personalities that you listen to and grow up with can be the calming, soothing voice to help you feel better, escape, or give you information news, but they don't have time to talk. They're not being given extra time to talk. And also, they're not even live. Remember, some of them are just live to tape, or they've already recorded their voice tracks. So they're not even part of the news story. They can't even take phone calls to talk to people and kind of give them a little bit of therapeutics to kind of just console and advise and, just offer a friendly hand. They're not out there. The flexibility they talk about. Radio reaches more than 90% of the U.S. population, according to Nielsen, but the definition of reach is murky. The metric doesn't account for passive background exposure, and it isn't broken up to illustrate the amount of active engagement. AM/FM radio listenership was down 5% between 2017 to 2019. Usage of SiriusXM and online platforms like streaming and podcasts had all increased. So revenue for radio advertising has decreased every year since 2015. So the medium as a whole has been less significant to the general public. We've talked about the bankruptcies. We've talked about the debt. We've talked about the mass layoffs and more reorganization. But Rolling Stone then says, but what if radio could pivot away from background listening and toward a more situation-based format? And, I have guys I talk to in radio that they were really doing great in radio, and they're just like, listen. And I have one guy that I talk to a lot, and, he's just like, you don't understand. You can't play the commercials. There's too many damn commercials. And that's what radio has. And this is what people don't talk about. Watch this story in Rolling Stone. They don't bring up the commercials. And that's the biggest problem. Not even so much the people that are on. It's that the commercials are so long and nobody wants to hear commercials anymore. That's why I don't even put any commercials on my podcasts, because I know people don't want it. They might play in the pre-roll, but that's it. After that, home free. You're listening to it free. You're listening to nothing else but me talking, chatting away for an hour. Now, terrestrial radio has the unique ability to freewheel. So insiders say DJs should be allowed to change course at a moment's notice to best serve their communities. But remember, they're not getting paid for it. What staff do they have to kind of do things and keep people engaged? They're using social media to do that. Now you're telling them to go from social media to engage with your audience in person on the air. They can't take phone calls. They can take texts. They can take messages from Facebook, but does that really matter? To change that around, it's not the same anymore. You don't have the staff to help out. You don't have the producers to help out. And most part, I don't know if you have the audience that wants to engage anymore like that. I don't know if they want to. I don't know if they will. It's kind of hard to do that these days. Radio personalities are able to get updates while they're live on the air, which is not possible with pre-recorded satellite radio shows or podcasts. These personalities have the advantage of being able to adjust with agility and express real emotion as it bubbles up. What stations are you listening to? First of all, if it's all morning shows, they're mostly syndicated. And they're not going to engage with a local audience. And also, how many time slots do you have that are voice tracked? Many. So this story doesn't really help out much. But here's the thing. Okay. Alex Gervaisi, he was a popular radio personality, worked at Kiss in LA. Spent 10 years at iHeartMedia and was part of the massive layoffs in December, right before Christmas. Real smart. Quote, people are gravitating towards things that feel familiar because there's so much comfort in that. But that's not enough. It depends on what they're saying. We're witnessing another culture shift away from things and people that are superficial and towards those who are authentic and self-aware. Now, that's a great point that Alex says. Established media is what that is. Superficial. All your late night hosts, all your celebrities, all the people that you see on TV on a regular basis. Not so much local news. Local news is different because it's a smaller audience. But when you're focused on a big target national audience, whatever shows you have, network, cable, what have you, they are not self-aware and not unique. They're superficial. That's a well-said point. That's actually a bigger point than Alex even realizes, but it's true. It's not just enough to be positive and upbeat anymore. Are you being vulnerable? Are you listening to the pulse of your community and the people in your community that might have struggles that look different than yours? You'll have a hard time connecting if you aren't listening first. And you know what? Howard Stern had that. Before he moved to satellite, he absolutely had that. He was vulnerable. He gave himself up on the air. He would let himself open up. Think about that. He did. But now he's superficial. I believe that wholeheartedly. He's making so much money now, it doesn't make a difference. It's a different audience. I mean, when you go to satellite radio, all the people that are paying, they're people that are just like sycophants. They're just love Howard, period. All the haters, all the people that would like the movie Private Parts, there was a big audience that would listen to hear what he had to say, but they hated him. And that's what it was. Tom Likas has that same problem. He has his own network, and you know what? He's not that easy to listen to either because it's all sycophants. It's all happy people. There are no people that are going to go and subscribe to this other outlet where if he's not on free air. When you're not on free air, then there is no diversity of opinions or voices. No, not at all. You isolate your audience. You're not trying to, but that's what happens because you become you're on a premium model. You're charging people to listen to you. So only the fans are going to listen to you, not everybody else, which is part of the thing that kind of sucks where other people can't do that. So that's what you're going to do. Now's the time to experiment, he says. All of our stations are playing less commercials because there's not much advertising right now. Doesn't matter. There's still too many commercials. People don't want to hear any of them. Just too many, period. When you're talking about some stations that play 16 commercials an hour, and don't tell me they don't all play commercials right now. Yes, they do. You know what they're playing now? They're just playing other commercials and charging probably a little to go ahead and get them on. Or they have to make good commercials for all their content. Remember, if you're an iHeartMedia, you have national ads that are being promoted by the network or by the station itself that they have to promote anyway. So there's always room for inventory. That's the point. The ad blocks never change. Even if you don't have the ad inventory, you don't have paid spots to go in them. You always have PSAs. You got lots of COVID PSAs, right? You also have lots of side commercials you could put in that could just be doubled up and just be included as well. They're not cutting the commercial breaks down. I'm sorry, that's not happening. But that should be the first thing they're doing. Now he says, I'm playing all songs that you can sing along to at 5 o'clock at any AC station. One of our stations in Long Island is providing fake live concerts, since there aren't concerts anymore. We're doing zanier stuff, this radio programmer says. And I'm going to have my afternoon guy on Star Talk about news when he usually talks about Lady Gaga's new song. On all of our stations, we put news updates at the top of every hour. Well, that should be a thing where we used to be before. News updates at the top of the hour are actually really cool. I actually like the fact that the stations back in the 60s, 70s, they all had news updates. Bring it back. You're not necessarily cool these days. Go play news updates again. I remember they were playing news updates after 9/11. Why did they get rid of it? Why did you just keep it? Put it on for a minute or two. Put some news, traffic, weather. Listen, if you got people listening, do it. People want to be informed. They don't think they're going to hear it. You cannot sell people on the music anymore. Do you understand? Because if you're an older formatted station and you're playing classic rock, you're playing country, whatever, then you're playing music and programming music that you can find anywhere on any platform. Spotify, Amazon Prime, Amazon Music, Pandora, Apple, whatever you want. It's all there. And as for new music, or as a new music station, a pop station, we've talked about how it takes 8 to 12 weeks for a song that might be trending high on streaming for it to get moved over to, because of the media base creation, right? Since we're using SoundScan, we're using other sources, and the Billboard Hot 100 is no longer the gauge, the dipping stick to show you what songs are new, what's happening. The Billboard Hot 100 is isolated and it is neglected by terrestrial radio. So when you see songs making the Billboard Hot 100, what happens is the system is played like this. So a song might get played and one of 2 or 3 things happens. A song that streams well after an album bomb or after the album was released, or the song becomes a lead single or a secondary or a promo single, whatever it is. They go into an era, song gets played, and then it will get a resurgence after the streaming is gone a little bit and after all the promotion through streaming goes, when radio picks it up 8, 12 weeks later. Unless you're an established artist that radio feels like it's a bona fide artist and say, you know what, we're just going to put your song right up. That's what they do. Put it to you like this. So there's a couple of songs that are playing right now that I'm really enjoying when I listen to the official chart on BBC Radio 1, which is a great countdown show. And BBC Radio 1 is a great station, one of the best. The European stations, they do the same thing. There are a couple of random stations in the country that are not corporate owned that do a really good job of playing new music as well. There's a station out of Bryan, Texas, or College Station, Texas, where Texas A&M University is based. There's a station that caters to that market. Younger station, KNDE, KND 95. And I'll tell you what, at night, they're playing all the new music that will be played, that will be listened to the Billboard Hot 100. They're definitely breaking the mold. So they play new music. Still got lots of commercials to know, but they at least are doing that, and they have personality on there. It's a station that kind of is a bit of a throwback, as a matter of fact. And very wide range in their music. They also play a lot of gold and a lot of turnaround stuff where, you know, songs you might not have heard after a while, they'll play them. They're definitely not a thin, small, tightly wound playlist where the top songs get played 120 songs, 120 spins a week or every 90 minutes. They're not doing that. So those stations, that's a different story. And it works for them because they blow out everybody else at the ratings. In the PBMs, by the way. So somehow Those college students that can't afford to go and pay for full price for Spotify or Apple or whatever, they're listening to the Candy 95 and it's played in the background of all these different stations. People actually listen to the radio station. And all the local ads, they're listening to local ads that matter to their market. They're not playing national stuff, not necessarily. I've listened to the station. It's a very localized station. Localized DJs with time to talk, and they do a pretty good job. They fit the market. But back to BBC Radio 1. They're playing new songs that I guarantee you will take a while before they get played and become number one over here. I mean, Blinding Lights did not get played right away here as soon as it got number one here. But it's been number one for what? 6-7 weeks right now, 2C Slide. Drake, that probably got dropped in and got an early ad by some stations that were willing to play it because, Drake's a hit. But, think about it. Lady Gaga, she streamed for a little bit, got a little bit of a push, dropped right back down, and now she's middling in the middle of the top 100, of the Hot 100 because her song's getting radio airplay, and that's it. It's the only thing they're injecting to her because it's the legacy audience. We're talking about an artist that's been around since 2007, and they're just trying to prop her up in radio because that's, a bona fide hit. Like, okay, put her in there. Let it play. Roxanne, Arizona Service. How long did it take for that song to get up to into the charts or get to be radio played? Same thing. Lizzo. Before anybody else was hearing her, I heard Lizzo going back to, October 2018 or September 2018, hearing the song Juice. And I thought she's pretty good. And then what happens? We get, Truth Hurts, and we get, Good as Hell. And all those songs come up. And there you go, right? Moves along. This is the things that are doing. So you can't do music. What you have to do is the local. And this is what Rolling Stone talks about. The importance of the local. Radio started shifting from local to national years ago. In smaller markets, you might still have a local DJ who covers the opening of a neighborhood restaurant or a hospital and needed supplies. But larger markets like LA, New York, and Chicago have become hubs of syndication. They want to be everything to everyone. This is according to former morning show producer at K-Rock, Jay Lightning Tillis, who left radio after 27 years at K-Rock. Or at the station, yes. And he said this: the one major advantage terrestrial radio has is it can be hyper-local. They can talk about the opening of a shoebox at the corner of La Crescenta. Have the agility to do that. They can broadcast out of their car, as many of the DJs used to do when cell phones were invented. It's not happening anymore. And you've noticed it as a listener. Moreover, when a station personality is told to represent multiple markets, it makes it hard for the station to solidify its own identity. On a broader scale, it makes it hard for the media to stand out from satellite radio, which is why I said to nationalize it. Quit trying to create individual stations. You're not putting the wool over anybody at all. Do what BBC Radio does. Do what Capital Radio does. Nationalize them. If that's what you got to do, do it. And find a way to make it work. But here's the deal. On a broader scale, it makes it harder for the medium to stand out from satellite radio, a platform that was made so that anyone, anywhere could access the same stations or the Spotifys or Pandoras of the world. Homogenization can occur through the content that's presented and the music that's played. The dissipation of localism wasn't something that happened overnight. It's death by 1,000 cuts, Tillis points out. Quote, it was something that happened every time the station was sold and traded hands. And the people who took it over cared a little less about the culture and what made it special. It also had to do with them wanting to use its identity to help sell other stations' commercial inventory. They want to be able to program all their stations and sell all their stations universally, meaning one person would oversee all alternative stations. You're seeing a homogenization or scaling of sales. If I'm calling Budweiser and I want to sell Budweiser's 117 radio stations and the only one they care about is K-Rock, but I can't sell them K-Rock, that's a problem. So over time, those barriers are removed, and those barriers have been the brand protection agents that work within the company and held on to the culture that made the station an anomaly. A 2019 Statista survey, this is a long story, but I'm making a good point here about radio and about broadcasters. This is an outlet right now that could be having people on board doing a great job in radio, people that are broadcasters. They could have a place to go on here and be hired and do something good. If this radio is essential. It should be essential work, and there should be people out there. But this business has gone to such shit. That's why they don't have this like this. This is why this story is being written. A survey of the reasons for the decline in radio listening in North America, 41% cited options. Other audio options as the main factor for leaving radio behind. And I guarantee one of those, too many commercials. And no commercials where they had to go, where people were willing to pay a subscription for satellite radio or streaming service where there's no commercials. That's what I did. Eventually, it took me a little while, but I said, you know what? I'm going to buy it. I do not need radio. And I'm a guy that was a big radio guy. And I worked in it. And I can't listen to the radio these days. Terrestrial radio, it's unlistenable. It's totally unlistenable. Hard to listen to now. Only for a select few things will I listen at all. Radio companies have publicly spoken about decisions to pursue a balance of local and national, with some believing that a 24/7 cycle of live and local news updates should be saved primarily for news talk stations, largely found on AM airways. David Field, Intercom CEO, suggests terrestrial radio can be home to many things, local content, but also podcasts, on-demand, and syndicated programming, as well as development of a one-stop shop platform like radio.com. And he's looking at a broader radio audio business to be delivered both terrestrially and digitally. No, I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. Podcast you cannot put on radio. And by the way, I talk about that with Dave Pratt on the interview a little bit later on. This part here really does take into what I'm going to talk to him about a little bit later on. But I'll tell you about it. Just listen to when I talk to Dave. There's so much that's said in that interview. It's so much information. But back to this story. Could branching out in so many ways confuse the consumer? Though, Field doesn't think so, and the double-digit growth in radio.com's listener hours and monthly average users would support the success of the multi-pronged strategy. They talk about street teams, which are no longer there. Promotional teams, they're just not there at all. It's gone. And again, it's all homogenized now. Radio conglomerates do show signs of wanting to adapt and pivot. Recently, for example, companies that have announced pay cuts in their executive tiers to help alleviate the economic fallout of the pandemic on their operations. We want our shareholders to know that we have taken immediate and proactive steps to weather this crisis. We talked about what Bob Pittman did to go and take a cut of his costs. And the company cut $250 million in cost, due in part to senior managers taking voluntary decreases in compensation. But again, they're not going to lose their bonuses, right? David Field, and honestly, hearing these people in the corporate suits, David Fields and the Bob Pittmans of the world, and what they're going to do, it's all about saving money. Really, they don't care about programming or content. It's about sales. Because that's what their bosses, their superiors are telling them to do. They don't have any control. When I think about it, Bob Pittman really doesn't have any control. I mean, how can you be in control when you're in debt? All those radio companies, they're all in debt. They can't command anything. Think about it. The radio business hasn't specified how savings will translate in the strategy, though in time, we'll see whether companies take strategic action to re-endear themselves to listeners, or whether these changes are enough to help the industry ride out the crisis. Well, it's not. Again, you're asking yourself that, but it's not going to work. It just won't happen. And it's unfortunate. But that's where we are with things now. Another thing with big radio consolidation, a story that got put out by Music Business Worldwide, and every so often they put some stuff out here. So, a blog post from David Israelite, President and CEO of the National Music Publishers Association, the trade association representing American music publishers and songwriting partners. Let me move down into the story a little bit and talk about what they're talking about. The once fledgling U.S. broadcast industry is now one of the most powerful industries in the world. Mostly heavily consolidated, songwriters are still being forced to subsidize them, even as radio giants' market power is massive and growing. Particularly relevant today is the Department of Justice considering whether Liberty Media, which owns a vast portion of SiriusXM, which recently acquired Pandora, as well as a large chunk of Live Nation, can buy iHeartMedia. If allowed, it would constitute the greatest pulling of power between satellite, digital, and terrestrial radio, concert promotion, and even podcasts in history. Consumer rights groups have already cautioned against this plan, saying it would lead to less competition, higher prices across radio, streaming, satellite, and potentially even live shows. So consumer groups warn, quote, will anyone be surprised if artists, songwriters, record companies, and PROs that refuse to give in to Liberty's demands on royalty rates find themselves shut out of access to live nation venues and Ticketmaster promotion. A lot of big venues they would lose out on. Will the new entity squeeze royalties even further for working artists and songwriters, piling onto the lost working class music jobs seen in places like Nashville, where since 2000, the number of working songwriters has collapsed by 80%. Why does this matter? Currently, the DOJ is reviewing the regulations of music creators and composers who belong to ASCAP and BMI, which have been around since World War II. Due to the ever-increasing power of broadcasters and digital revolution, the rules applied in the 1940s no longer make sense. So again, the attack has gone on after the streaming bodies, and they all have now said, okay, because of the Music Modernization Act, the streaming services are now paying more. But then we had the Local Radio Act. We had the acts that were trying to be put together. Remember, there were two acts. The AMFM Act was also the one that was trying to be instituted just for this purpose. But there was a part of a bigger act. And music modernization was split off into its own act, and that got passed. But AMFM Act, not yet. So the artists, they're trying to find their way to make money because they can't make money off of sales. They need to be able to make money, which they, at the moment, with the pandemic, they're not making money off of merchandise. They're not making money off of live events. So for music to be thriving again, royalties have to come in. And they need to expect the radio stations to pay up. Because the streaming services are now. What it comes down to. Of course, radio's free, so like, why are they going to be charged for it? We're giving you all this free promotion and publicity. Well, you're also controlling it too. I mean, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, they're just putting it out there. People can go look for it and find it. But radio, it's controlled, it's programmed. Bigger difference. Broadcasters have played both sides of the regulation fence for some time. They've resisted efforts to be regulated themselves in form of a compulsory license that they say amounts to a subsidy for satellite and cable providers. In reality, they are simultaneously the beneficiaries of equally outdated regulations when it comes to securing performance licensees from songwriters. So one of the biggest issues now with songwriters that are regulated by the DOJ is that they must license all their music in all forms through ASCAP or BMI if they're a member. So the performing rights organizations are responsible for how they're paid by terrestrial radio, bars and restaurants, myriad other venues, and most critically, digital streaming. So PROs, that is what ASCAP and BMI are. Performing rights organizations. Practically speaking, if you're a songwriter and you benefit by using ASCAP or BMI to license the hundreds, if not thousands of bars, restaurants, and venues, it's hugely efficient. Imagine you can take it out and separately negotiate the value of your songs to streaming services. These platforms are very different, so it makes sense that they would be negotiated and licensed on their own. And this is how it's done on the recording side. Artists and labels negotiate directly with digital streaming companies like Spotify and Amazon Music. Isn't it time for the songwriters to have the same freedom? Point well taken. While music publishers, songwriters, and the PROs themselves all agree that getting rid of the consent decrees altogether might be too much of a disruption to allow. But publishers are asking for a reasonable middle ground. If regulations must stand, at least give songwriters the ability to withdraw the rights to their music just for digital streaming so they can negotiate the true value of their work. They don't need to belong in the same bucket. And continue to forbid them to do so means they will never get a fair price on the platforms. They're undoubtedly the future. What we're seeing in the market is licensees from broadcasters to satellite and streaming companies getting larger and more formidable when compared to songwriters' shrinking ability to get a fair shake. Songwriters at the core are small businesses. Right now, there's a window to protect them against the ever-consolidating broadcast, digital, and tech interests. And DOJ should take this opportunity to at least give them the rights to selectively withdraw some of their most valuable rights. This is a reasonable solution that will help balance the marketplace and give music creators the same rights that other property owners have always enjoyed. As giant radio and tech interests continue to make inroads towards merging, the last thing songwriters need to be subjected to is unfair regulation due to having too much market power. I like what's being said right there. Looking out for the little guys. The corporates, the establishment media, you're getting the content from the songwriters and the musicians themselves. Why aren't they getting a take? It's very well said. I mean, radio shouldn't be getting a break like it is anymore. They're monetizing all of this. And to a certain point, so are the streaming services, but again, they're just getting a set price. But radio's making a raking in, just getting all these different advertisers on board. And, just saying it's being played for free when it's really not, and not all those songs are getting played for free, doesn't say so much. It doesn't help as much. It's a very well said point. Subscriber expectations blown away by Netflix. You want to know how big they've gotten? 16 million new subscribers have signed on. 15.77 million paid subscribers in the first quarter. The biggest quarter for paid net additions to their subscriber base was 9.6 million a year ago. They doubled it. Huge. First quarter earnings, $709 million. $344 million a share a year ago. Revenue went up to $5.7 billion from $4.5 last year. Damn. A lot of money, baby. Almost 16 million. So shows like Money Heist and Tiger King, Murder, Mayhem, and Madness have helped to make a big deal. And Netflix continues to be the number one streaming service ahead of Apple TV, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, CBS All Access. I mean, it's all ahead of them all. Amazing. They also have new movies that are going to be picking up that have been brought in that were actually set for full release in the theaters, but they're now being put strictly to Netflix. They're doing pretty good with that. Now, it doesn't mean that they're still not, and also the stock price has gone up in the last 12 months, 13.6%. But it doesn't mean that they're still not putting money down. They did just take another $1 billion in debt in order to buy new content. So they're still working their way up. But again, this is actually helping out. Their shareholders are happy because they just got that many more subscribers to help pay down their debt a little bit. They're still in debt. But when you're seeing numbers like that, again, it's cash flow positive. That's what they're all seeing about that. The only thing is, Netflix right now needs to continue to keep that up. AT&T's hurting, man. They've lost 900,000 new subscribers this past quarter. They got to keep going. And Netflix has a chance to really clean up. They have to keep working hard if they want them to keep do that. Writers Guild of America, they're starting contract talks with the AMPTP coming up May 11th. And they're prepared to agree to its extended current pact to June 30th, which is a good story. There was a story from the New York Times talking about how the Hollywood production jobs can try to soldier on. Production has ground to a halt, leaving a vast number of people without work and trying to figure out how to finish projects remotely. So across the industry, shooting is not expected to resume until August, in part because of the time it will take to reassemble casts and crews once the threat subsides. So a vast number of people without work. Hollywood supports 2.5 million jobs, according to the Motion Picture Association of America. Many workers are freelance, getting paid project to project. Huge. Disney is betting that theaters will be selling tickets and popping popcorn again by late July. Some analysts say August at the earliest, or it could be June. And they could also say, could it be China that will get started up first? Now, Megan Colligan, the president of IMAX Entertainment, they run the 1,529 large format commercial theaters around the world. They're strategizing about how to create the strongest gust of wind possible when reopening does happen. Now, there are places where we talked about streaming where some of the theaters are starting to stream, and I know the indie pictures are starting to look into streaming as well. It's all kind of happening. interesting when they brought all about that part. A few little stats I wanted to bring up on that. Now, back to music. Another story says that the current situation is going to dramatically change the music business as a huge accelerator of user behavior on the digital side. Again, digital disruption wins. Another story from music business worldwide, they said the current situation, again, will dramatically change the music business. So they're saying that when it comes to digital sales, or physical sales, actually, when people want to go and buy albums, I guess they still do that. When physical sales return in September, they will all return at levels that are 50% lower than they were pre this crisis. So there's an expected change in user behavior coming out now, where they're expecting actually a substantial surge in online digital use and accelerating a physical to digital music consumer transition that experts believe will take 2 to 3 years to happen in normal circumstances. The positive news, particularly for genres like metal, classical, and others that were not super digital before, they're expected to see a strong acceleration of people adopting paid streaming subscriptions. Online engagement with fans is all the more important now because so many artists and labels will be rushing to release albums in a limited window during that third and fourth quarter period, with artists competing for a limited amount of people's attention. The stronger digital relationship you can build with your fans now, the better for your physical release in the future. There we go. So I go through these little stories and I find out some nice little nuggets of information that are important to those content creators out there, to the musicians, the broadcasters, the people out there that are creating the content creators. I care about you guys. That's why it's important to point these things out. 2 other things before we get to my interview with Dave Pratt. I want to bring up this about movies. We keep talking about it. There's a thought about what movies will be playing in theaters when the movies come back. Variety.com reports coronavirus fallout might redefine the types of movies that play in theaters. So the theatrical model is being rethought, according to the CEO of ATT, parent company of Warner Brothers, John Stankey. So under normal circumstances, middle-tier movies, often based on original content and not part of an existing property, was already struggling to make a profit at the box office. Audiences in recent years have been going to the movies to see new installments from big franchises or nothing at all. While stuck indoors under lockdown, consumers have grown even more accustomed to streaming movies from the comfort of their own home. Executives suggest those habits can make moviegoers more unwilling to buy tickets to mid-level films in the future. Warner Brothers was in damage control later that day, walking back the statement. They say, quote, "We remain supportive of the theatrical experience and our exhibition partners." But again, they still stress they have confidence in tentpole titles. Tenet, Wonder Woman 1984 are movies that are going to go ahead with release dates later this year, coming up immediately after we get movies back up and going in the late summer. When theaters are able to turn the lights back on, executives will be tasked with finding new release dates for blockbusters that were shelved during the global health crisis. The focus for studios, understandably, will be on major tentpoles that come with expensive brand partnerships, toys and other ancillary perks, smaller budgeted movies, the kind that have the potential to be Oscar bait or an embarrassing blemish, could in turn be left by the wayside. The longer this goes, the more consumer behavior changes. The more movies you can watch on Netflix, Amazon, or Disney Plus, the harder it's going to be to get people back in movie theaters. That's according to Rich Greenfield, media analyst at Lightshed. It's possible to get less incentive to plant fags back on the calendar for films that might have already been a gamble. With each major movie delayed, the box office lineup only gets more crowded and competitive. We talk about some of the movies that are being moved around that we've already talked about. And yet, even though the public health crisis has further imperiled the subset of theatrical release, it's even made them even more vital. With theaters closed, they represent a rare source of income for studios cut off from a major revenue stream. Studios are scrambling right now to adapt to a crisis that has little precedent, but hostility from theater owners, which have long resisted any alterations or amendments to the amount of time a film exclusively plays in cinemas, might not disappear anytime soon. So that barrier between going to Netflix or going to on demand digitally shouldn't change. The tension over the length of the theatrical window has been simmering for years. It's going to continue. But it's going to continue to be especially unsettled while theaters are operating less than full strength. So that means that cinemas may make a big stink about how all these new digital releases, but they don't have the leverage that they did pre-pandemic. They'll be desperate to anything to get people back in the seats. And that leaves studios holding the cards. Interesting story right there. That's what's going on. Listen, of this year, of all the movies that have come out, normally you have a 60 to 9-day window before movies get pushed over. But because of what happened here, it all changed. I'm looking at the story from Variety.com, and they show the video on demand windows right now. The Hunt got pushed out to on demand in 7 days. Bloodshot, 11 days. Emma in 14 days. Invisible Man in 21 days. Call of the Wild in 35 days. And then it was moving forward. But again, all those certain movies that had all come out, they all got the video on demand when normally some of those movies wouldn't even be out yet in normal circumstances. Interesting stuff. Many of Fox Sports on-air talent will take pay cuts. And this is a rare thing, by the way, because I've heard a lot of talent taking pay cuts. But this is one of the first ones I've heard where actual talent that we see on TV on a regular basis, they are taking pay cuts. Let's talk about it. So many of Fox Sports on-air anchors and analysts will take a temporary pay cut in tandem with compensation decreases among top executives at Fox Corporation. So top executives, the Murdochs, Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch, will forego compensation through September 30th. So they're expecting a temporary 15% salary reduction. Now, while Disney also having its own issues, they earlier this month asked 100 of ESPN's top on-air personnel to take temporary pay cuts of around 15%. But again, that's because they're not doing that much content. They can't do sports. They have to do all this other content. They have to figure out other ways. Sports World is trying to determine if there's a regular season for the NFL that will occur in 2020. At the moment, NFL draft is going on as I record this, and they're going ahead. We'll see if the NFL season actually continues. I think it does. Somehow people will actually go out and do it. All right. Time now for interview time. I want to again welcome on to the Broadcasters Podcast, Hall of Fame broadcaster, the morning mayor, originally from KUPD-FM in Phoenix, Arizona, where he was based for over 30 years, or 30 years exactly, and now is the owner of Star Worldwide Networks. I welcome Dave Pratt to the Broadcasters Podcast. Take a listen to this interview and enjoy part one. So my next guest is a member of the Broadcasters Hall of Fame, an esteemed class, Music and Entertainers Hall of Fame as well. He's the owner of Star Worldwide Networks, one of the fastest growing internet radio and TV networks in the nation. My guest is also media consultant for Tribune Media Group with over 40 television stations in America, including Chicago's very own 720 WGN Radio in Chicago. I'm here with the morning mayor, Dave Pratt. Dave, welcome.
Oh, well, thank you. And thanks for having me. Together, we are lean, mean quarantine machines. And yeah, and the Tribune, by the way, just to be clear on that, I loved consulting with the Tribune. But a few months ago, our group sold to Nexstar for $6.4 billion, something small like that. So, yeah, we did have WGN and KTLA in Los Angeles and WPIX in New York and legendary stations all over the nation. And I loved working with Tribune, and I loved consulting them. It was an honor. But that did flip over to Nexstar, $6.4 billion.
You know, it's a little hard to keep it with all this stuff going on. Just honest with radio, I mean, it's always a surprise when you see stations that are getting bought off and companies that are actually kind of increasing up as opposed to those that are being held, hostage by private equity groups. When
that went to Nexstar, they were so kind to me, and on both sides of the companies doing the transaction, they were both overly kind to me. But when it went to Nexstar, they said, "So Dave, are you still interested?" And I said, "Well, guys, you're talking about moving from 40 stations to 200 and some. It's the job's different. And in the meantime, I'm still running this network back in Arizona, so I don't know if I can take off that big a bite of the apple, but I sure appreciated it."
Now, real quick, I'm just to put this together. Were you? Did you ever get to work or rub shoulders work-wise with Kim Commando?
Oh, of course. In fact, Kim and her husband, Barry, a lot of people don't realize this, but her husband, Barry, was one of the highest profile personalities in the history of Arizona. Incredibly entertaining guy, funny, one of my all-time favorite radio personalities. Barry Young, and Kim, his wife, developed this wonderful network on her own, and our kids went to school together.
Wow.
So been friends with them forever. In fact, her husband, Barry, I started out as a media warhorse here before doing the network and before starting our own company as an agency. Barry and I were so obnoxious on telethons, they would actually separate us like fifth graders. They wouldn't let us. They wouldn't let us be on camera together. They'd separate us, and he would be in Studio A, and I would be in Studio B because we weren't allowed to hang out together on telethons.
You know, the thing is, where you are in Phoenix, there is well, first of all, number one, that market has some great talent, and that has had some great radio for a long time over there. And honestly, I can go back and listen, for Kim Commander for 20 plus years, America's Digital Goddess. I used to remember that's a staple on weekends on any radio station that matters, basically, is that right there.
Yeah. Kim is so good. And the Data Doctors, also a national show that concentrates on digital, also from Arizona with Ken. So yeah, we're proud of that. And hey, you're in a great area too. South Florida has produced some unbelievable radio over the years. So you and I are both blessed.
Oh my God. I mean, if I had to name the names I had here, well, right off the bat, I mean, from Rick Shaw to Neil Rogers to Sonny Fox to, oh man, no, there was a time we just had some fantastic radio here. I mean, just for a lot of different
Larry
areas.
Larry King, Bubba.
Yes.
I mean, South Florida, unbelievable.
Yeah, no. It was a lot of places like that. Like I'll go to air checks and I'll listen to some things over there, which I don't think I found any of your air checks out there. I was trying to look for some. It was a little hard to go and find, but I must say in those days that you came on the air. So let me just go and get a little bit of the background into your radio career prior to the network here. You spent 30 years at Phoenix's KUPD, which is a album-oriented rock station, real heritage rock station, if you will. 2 decades as a morning mayor, as declared by the Arizona Attorney General. And even KUPD at the time when you were there, it was praised as America's top rock station. And first of all, before you came into the business, I mean, I remember listening to a book on Audible, the book from Richard Neer about FM. So the story of all the progressive rock stations that came together prior to, so, the Tom Donahos and the Scott Muni's and all these people that were all beforehand. Talk to me about the rock radio market, because at that point, consultants like Lee Abrams and others started to infiltrate right there in 1980 when you showed up. Talk about the state of the market at that point.
Yeah. So as far as air checks and stuff like that, I'm a little bit different than most radio personalities, to where I've never considered radio to be the highlight of my career, although I've enjoyed it so much and I'm so grateful for it, and the living that it's giving my family still is always highly appreciated. But I've never considered it as the high point of my career. Therefore, I have never saved an air check. I don't have one air check on my show.
Wow.
I've never posted an air check. I don't save any awards at all. Typically over the years when I received an award, we would have a funny show to where I would give the award to one of my listeners. And even when I would win an award, even the national awards, I would choose a listener to go with me, and they would accept it on my behalf, because I never really cared about that stuff too much. I was more into the art form and more into entertaining than I was nostalgia. But then, I don't know, about probably 2005 or something, they were going to put me into the Hall of Fame, and they said, Dave, we don't have anything. We don't have any photos. We have a ton of stories. We know you want a ton of all this stuff. They said, would you do something? And I said, sure, I'll write a book. So I did.
Right.
And it's all in the book, and I donated it all to charity. And that book will be refreshed on May 11th, and it will come out as an audio book, chapter by chapter, starting May 11th, with an update on it. And it has all the stories in there that you're talking about, all the programmers, all the research people that I worked with, early stuff like auditioning at MTV, hosting US festivals in San Bernardino, it has all those stories in there.
Now, I want to bring up the book in a little bit. The book, by the way, if you're looking for it right now, is Behind the Mic, 30 Years in Radio. And like you said, updated it so far, and you're creating an audiobook version for it. So I want to bring that up in a few minutes. But I want to just get back. The original point I want to take out of this is that regardless of, the way you might perceive your career behind the mic, most importantly, I mean, it is the crux of what brought you to where you are now. I mean, because, the reputation comes with it. There's something to be said. I want to take this to a higher level, 30,000 above feet conversation, because of the fact that I look at the people that hosted radio to become something more. When I look at every damn game show host I've seen out there, they all have radio experience. So your best MCs all have radio experience, and they don't even bother to put people in front of the Oscars, the Academy Awards, the Emmys. For whatever reason, you don't see people being placed as MCs like that. They're taking some people from other areas, but for the most part, they were radio people, all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even actors and people that we know. I mean, going back, Bob Crane, Hogan's Heroes.
Yeah.
Radio personality from Los Angeles. Radio personalities first, and then they morphed into other types of media.
Because that theater of the mind, something to be said about what you're able to go and do after all that said and done. Gene Shepard, I always think about from WOR back in the day. That was an amazing story about him. About he wrote a Christmas Story, and that movie's making royalties over royalties every year. But that I love, and the thing is, I love gimmicks like that. His was, you know about that one, about how he would tell people, if you're listening at night, turn your porch light on and keep it on all night. I thought that was fantastic. Little things like that were always like the cues, but it's like, you know what to do to engage your audience. And no matter what you do after that, you're always going to have the ire of people, because you're going to say, okay, what's the next thing this person's going to do? That's when I feel like you have that same direction.
Yeah. In this town, and we've been proud of that, it definitely had a stamp on this town. I'll give you a couple examples. I always went by the mayor. Because it's a longer story, but I've always gone by the mayor. And still today, when I go out around town, more people call me the mayor than they do Dave. In Arizona, everybody calls me the mayor. When my daughter was in kindergarten, her teacher was so disappointed because she had told her that the mayor was going to come and talk to the class. And when I got there, the teacher's like, "You're not the mayor. You're a radio guy." I'm like, "Everybody calls me the mayor." The other thing, stamp that I think it's really put on Arizona, is one of the big sayings that I did over the years. And it was real simple. I would say to the crowd, if you don't deserve it, and the crowd would chant back, who does? And I would bring on major concerts in Arizona over the years, from U2 Rattle and Hum to the Who at Sun Devil Stadium to Springsteen Born in the USA to the first Def Leppard tour to, I mean, you name it, right? All these concerts that I introduced over the years, I would end by saying, all right, so get ready for Motley Crue, because if you don't deserve it, and the crowd would just blow dry your hair. Who does? And it was so loud that all of these groups would say, Dave, what was that thing you said? How do I get the crowd to do that? And it was so funny teaching like lead singers of the Scorpions, or teaching Tim McGraw later in my country days how to do this. And then when they would get the reaction, they'd look over the side of the stage and smile, and they'd be so excited because they found a way to engage with the crowd. And it was just kind of a magical little saying. Well, even today, although they don't say my name with it, sometimes there'll be a sporting event in town, or a Fiesta Bowl, or a big event in town.
Yeah.
At the Fiesta Bowl parade, they said, here comes the University of Ohio State, marching band, the Ohio State Buckeyes marching band. Let's hear it for them. If they don't deserve it, and then everybody yells, who does? That all started with my culture on the radio, and people still use that,
and that's what I'm talking
all
about.
The time.
That's what I'm talking about. What you were to Phoenix is what Bill Graham was to San Francisco, basically.
Well, I would never even put myself in the same breath with Bill Graham.
Hey, to be putting that kind of
thank you.
Company's not that bad. Come on now.
Oh man, I'll take that all day long. But thank you very much. And I've just been really lucky to spend my entire career in the same city. I never wanted to leave. I did for a blink, and I came back within 2 weeks because I missed Phoenix so much. And all that's documented in the book. Been lucky to have offers from every city you can possibly imagine, and MTV and everybody else. And I never jumped because I love this city, and I always wanted to be that guy that's aligned with a city, and been able to see Phoenix grow. Keep in mind when
it is a big
I
thing
started here, and
people from another market try to move over. Just some of that has just not worked. I mean, when you were embedded someplace for so long, and people were familiar, it's just too bad that we just don't see that much. Where these days, I don't know if it makes much of a difference, but in the time you were doing the radio for 3 decades up into the 2000s, it's just everything has changed the way radio is. So it's just now survival. It's not even there's a choice anymore as a top radio personality. There's just nothing there, unless you get syndicated, I guess.
The industry's changed so much, and so many great personalities have come through Phoenix. The original owner of KUPD, the station where I started, said, "Dave, I'll give you a contract if you can beat Jonathan Brandmeier."
Oh.
And I said,
I remember
wow.
He went there. Yeah. Oh, that's WLS fame.
WLUP in Chicago.
Oh, sorry,
yeah.
The Loop. That's right. I was thinking like Larry Lujack and all that stuff. But yeah, you're right.
He was here. He was here just before it. The owner said, and he was huge here. And I was a young guy. I was 19, just getting my teeth cut on a low-rated rock station at the time out of a trailer in the middle of Guadalupe, Arizona. It was one of the lowest-rated stations in the market when I started on it. And the owner said, he kind of laughed, and he goes, "If you can beat Jonathan Brandmeier, I'll give you a contract."
Wow.
And about halfway through my first ratings book, thank God Johnny took an offer to Chicago. And I laugh about it today. So I only competed against him for a half book. So we beat him that book, right?
Nice.
Because he wasn't there, though. If he would have been there, I have no doubt that he would have won that book.
Oh.
So I joked with him later on about it. I said, "Thank you so much for leaving Phoenix and opening the door." And he said, "No, you were up and coming." And it's just really been a pleasure over the years. What you're talking about with radio changing so much, and today it's really nothing, that is so true. Part of it is because radio programming, entertainment, and talent has gone down so far because it's just not the place to be anymore.
Nobody wants to go.
But a bigger part of it is technology. So my kids, and they aren't young. My oldest is 26. Oh. I would imagine that he can't even name a radio station. I doubt if any of my kids can even name.
Oh, it's hard to turn it on now.
I don't think they can even name
one. I can't turn it on that much anymore.
So when you and I were really, cutting our chops in radio and loving it and listening to it, we had our favorite stations. We may have had a T-shirt, a bumper sticker, or whatever we had. A personality would go out and do an appearance on the corner, and we'd show up to take a photo with them and say hello. Anymore, the younger generation, I challenge them to even name a station. They just don't care.
But as a radio fan and as a person that got to work in radio, that has worked in radio now, I took it for granted how good it was. And, it's obviously there's an involvement where that audience has gone. So there are places to be entertained, but it's just the format's changed. The technology disruption has changed every format there is of media. Music, movies, TV, and radio have come in completely disrupted from the internet. And now we're getting just to where the technology has gotten so well, the bandwidth has gotten so easy to put up whatever you want now. It's just grown so much. Let me go ask you a few more questions about music and radio in general. Just want to get through those real quick. So now you did make the switch over to a crosstown station. You got to work with CBS Radio for a while after you left KPD, and they offered you a lot of money to stay, but you went ahead and went along. You went on a station where Howard was on. So obviously if Howard's on that station, you were going to be okay at KZOM. This gun hat at that time, he was obviously still like super hot. And At that point, right in around the 2000s, and this is what always bothers me right now, that the whole rock is dead argument. Rock radio faded, and you smartly moved into country after that, KMLE, which is within the same cluster, which was a good thing. Now, you saw the running of the wall. You saw rock changing. They always talk about Woodstock 99 as being one of the major factors, but more than that, what is it now that, I mean, right now, I'm almost about the fact you got to hear things with instruments and not digital. Talk to me about the fact that when you switched over to country, you still get to hear what's kind of what rock was. It's like you're still hearing people with instruments, and it's like this guitar and it's drums, and it's like not anymore. And like alternative rock is so different now. So I don't even know what it is supposed to be anymore.
So when that transition happened, I was at KUPD for 20 years, and they had changed ownership. They went to a corporate ownership, and rock was changing for KUPD to these alternative bands. Instead of being fun and exciting and having a smile on their face and really enjoying the ride, you got a bunch of angry alternative people staring at their tennis shoes on stage, depressed, wearing a plaid shirt. It didn't do anything for me. It didn't resonate with me. Yeah. And at the same time, this corporate vanilla homogenized ownership was coming in to KUPD. So I told them, I said, guys, I'm going to find something else to do. Now, this is before I even had another job. I just said, guys, I'm out. And they said, well, where are you going? Somebody else making the offer? And I said, no, I just don't want to be here. I don't want to be with you. But I appreciate my time here, but I have no interest in this culture. So they were pretty shocked. And they said, well, write out the 6 months of your contract. And I said, of course, I've never walked on a contract in my life, never will. Yeah. During that time, once I made it known that I was going to leave KUPD, we were blessed to have many offers in town, from talk radio to country to rock or whatever. Yeah. And this rock station in town that was nowhere at the time, Howard was not on it, by the way, made me an offer at CBS. They said, Dave, would you come over? I said, sure. And they said, that's it? We're not going to talk money or anything? I said, I'll show you what KUPD offered. You match it, and I'm there. And they said, that's it? And I said, yep. So I took them the offer from KUPD, and I said, here it is. Match it. Throw some appearances and endorsements on top, and I'm there. We're done. We're down the road. They said, that's it? No agent, nothing? I said, no, that's it. So I went over, and then CBS contacted me about a month later. Timing is everything. And I'll keep this short for you. But they said, Dave, Howard is a CBS personality. You are now a CBS personality. Howard's contract is up for the other little station in Phoenix that he was on, and we need to put him on in Phoenix, Arizona. And I said, okay. And they said, we only have 3 stations in Phoenix. We have an oldies station, we have a country station, and we have a rock station. So we need to put Howard on the rock station. Yeah. And I said, that's fine, guys, but I own that monopoly square. You want to put Howard on Boardwalk or Park Place? Sorry, I've already got my Pratt Hotel on it. You've already guaranteed me that space for the next 5 years.
Oh, okay, got it.
And so they said, so if we want Howard on, we have to go through you. And I said, absolutely, I'm the toll bridge. So if you want Howard on, not only do you have to pay me for a different shift, you need to pay me to put Howard on. Wow. So it was a really nice position to be in. But as a personality away from business, so that's business, and we all do business. That's just flat business. But away from business, I looked at it and I went, okay, you're going to have Howard and Pratt on the same station in Phoenix? No brainer. So I moved, I let him pay the toll bridge, put Howard on mornings, and then I immediately went on afternoons. And for a short period of time, when they could afford both of us, it's the highest listened to rock station in the history of Phoenix ever. Boom. 3 months out, we just annihilated the entire city.
Oh my God.
Annihilated it.
Wow.
So about a year and a half goes down the road, and I got bored. And I told CBS, I said, I need a new challenge. I said, this is just, I don't want this to sound elitist, but it's too easy.
Now, did you get in the afternoon drive? Did you kind of get to keep the morning format, or did they really like cut your talk time?
Oh yeah, no, I did anything I wanted to do.
That's great. Okay,
I was having a ball, and I got to tell you, Howard was awesome. and his crew and his staff would come in town and screw around with me, and we'd do shows and live shows, and Howard's on the air calling me a brother, and I'm on the air, and this is a guy I used to compete with.
Right.
And I'm on the air having a blast with his staff. They could not have been more generous and nicer. We had a ball, and we just kicked butt together. Well, anyway, about a year and a half, I got bored. And I said, I need a new challenge. CBS came to me and they said, Dave, our country station's dying. And they kind of laughed. I said, great, I'll do it. And they go, yeah, right. And I said, no, guys, I'll do it. They said, you'll do what? I said, I'll do mornings. They said, there's no way, Dave. A 30-year rock guy in this town going, mornings? Are you kidding? And I said, look, and this is what you were referring to a few minutes ago. I said, look, guys, country is the new rock. And they said, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I said, you have Garth Brooks flying over stadiums in harnesses. You have the hottest women now in the music industry as the poster girls in rock with Faith Hill and Shania Twain. You have Pyro coming from Kenny Chesney and these shows that's bigger than Kiss.
Yep.
You have the new rock and country, and you don't even realize it. I said, look at Nashville right now. Kid Rock is there.
Yeah.
Right? Kid Rock had a number one song in country. I think it was number one with Sheryl Crow called Picture. Bon Jovi had a number one song, Who Says You Can't Go Home, with Jennifer Nettles from Sugarland.
Right.
At the time, ZZ Top was in Nashville hanging out with Brooks and Dunn. Metallica's on the CMA Awards. I mean, what is going on? Everybody's in Nashville. If Lynyrd Skynyrd came out today, they would be country.
Yes, I agree.
So I fit right in. I go to Nashville for my first visit. Bret Michaels is there.
All right.
I'm looking around going, this is old home week. And I never felt better. And before you knew it, we were nominated for CMA Major Market Morning Show of the Year at Madison Square Garden, New York. And I'm like, this is hilarious.
That's awesome.
A rock personality that moved over. So I really enjoyed all that. I loved being a disruptor. I still love it.
No. That's the way it should be. That's going to do it for this week. Part 2 of my interview of 3 parts with Dave Pratt continues next week. So until then, till next week, remember that content is king and control of your content is in your hands.
Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast, presented by BroadcastersPodcast.com and KingofPodcasts.com. The Broadcasters Podcast is brought to you by KingofPodcasts.com/Amazon. If Amazon is good enough for the King of Podcasts, it most certainly is good for you. KingofPodcasts.com/Amazon. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program. The Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at KingofPodcasts.com.